Those of you who, like me, have outstanding spouses, whether they are famous or infamous, locally, statewide, or nationally, know what it's like to be a spouse. My wife Cassandra is a well-known local politician, so we are constantly attending all sorts of events, many of which she is recognized at. I'm a simple businessman, although I have my own company and am doing quite well financially, thank you, and I don't really like being the center of attention. But Cassandra insists that I attend at least 3/4 of the events with her. Cassandra is a true extrovert and talks to just about everyone at every event. How she can know so many people and remember their names and anything else about them is unfathomable to me, while I'm ambivalent and despise idle conversation. At most of the events I attend with Cassandra, I primarily appreciate female guests. There are always many different types. Here are some of the more notable ones: young, chubby, and adorable, blonde with recently enlarged breasts, thin and middle-aged with a good facelift, older and stylish, dressed provocatively to impress, showing off big legs so as not to emphasize facial or breast imperfections, clearly bored, simply attractive, and also plain but cheerful. I can find something of value in almost any woman, except those who are old and obese. Although I had a rich fantasy life at the beginning of this story where I admired female event organizers, is that the right word? I was almost boringly true to myself. Even though at my age of 45 and 195 centimeters tall, I still played basketball and weighed 100 pounds. My hair was still almost entirely blonde, any gray hair lay down well and was unnoticeable, and I received more attention from women than I should have. However, I rarely flirted, and certainly never went to extremes. I skillfully pushed away drunken women who hit on me. A May Wednesday evening found me at an almost routine event that I attended as a spouse. Since it was beautiful weather, the women were wearing less clothing than usual, and the percentage of attractive women was higher than usual. There was really beautiful greenery outside, so it was a pleasant evening. Then I saw her, and the sight went from pleasant to frightening. She was a brunette in her early 40s or so, with an even natural complexion. She wasn't the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen, and she certainly wouldn't win a beauty contest. She wasn't dressed particularly provocatively, though her clothes were tailored with excellent taste and accentuated her best features. She didn't have a lush form. She was short, probably 160 centimeters, though I like tall women. Cassandra was 180 centimeters tall. She had a small ass. I like slender women with big asses. However, what I could see of her legs, including her thighs, looked as beautiful as I have never seen anywhere. Even more important was the way she held herself, smiling, laughing, and sipping red wine that made her as sultry as a tropical breeze on a cold winter day. She seemed at ease shaking her hair, reaching into her purse or licking her lips, holding her hands, drinking her wine, and moving her shoulders in an excitable manner. However, these sensual movements were nothing compared to her gait, which absolutely mesmerized me. As she strolled more than walked, her head was up, her shoulders were squared, and she showed off her breasts. Though not large, they were ample. Her arms swung freely back and forth, and her hips swayed from side to side, with her body weight resting on her heels rather than the pads of her feet. Watching her move from place to place, I didn't even notice how turned on I was until she was out of sight behind the veranda column. I had a full-blown erection, the first time I'd ever had one at an event like this. I reassured myself by looking at women who were ugly, overdressed, or old-fashioned, and cautioned myself against further attempts to find her and ogle her. I really don't want my wife or even a friend or acquaintance to suddenly catch me with arousal. It's too embarrassing, I cautioned myself. About 15 minutes later, I was standing on the uneven brick walkway of the patio, but looking at the pool to my left rather than directly in front of me. Despite my caution, I was probably instinctively looking for Miss Walking Erotic Dream, when I was pounced on and felt the liquid soak into my chest. "Oh, I'm sorry. I tripped over a protruding brick and soaked your shirt," came a distinctly female voice. I was alarmed by my unexpected shower until I looked down and saw the culprit. Miss Sex on Wheels. I don't think it's that bad, I stammered, as she tried to wipe away the red wine that had spilled down my shirt with a napkin. "I don't know if there's anything I can do," she mumbled as she continued to press the napkin against my chest. Well, at least if I had to take an unexpected bath, it was from the sexiest woman here. I grinned. She stopped trying to wipe the wine off my shirt, though her hand remained on my chest, and looked me straight in the eye with an expression that was hard to read. Suddenly, I was embarrassed by my statement. "I'm really sorry," I squeezed out. Sometimes the filter between my brain and my mouth doesn't work very well. A wide smile appeared on her face, and she said, still looking me in the eye, "I'm more worried about the filter between your eyes and your brain not working," she laughed. "I didn't splash wine on your cornea, did I? I guess my filter was still malfunctioning because I went on, even though by now I'd had time to think. My eyes are actually working fine. If you don't think you're the sexiest woman here, you either need corrective lenses or you don't have a realistic sense of self." "Oh, really?" she grinned. As she continued wiping my breasts with the napkin, she looked around. I should have jokingly told her, "I give you half an hour to stop this body contact." But somehow I didn't have the heart after the sexiest woman tach comment and continued. "What about that young woman to your left in the short red dress?" She giggled, nodding her head to the right. "She's pretty, but she's no match for you sexually," I replied nonchalantly, looking down at her while her gaze darted between the red stain on my shirt and my eyes and then to her left. "What about the woman in the yellow pashmina and with the size 4 bust to your right? Some guys might find her gorgeous, but to me you're twice as sexy." "I can't believe we're having this conversation," she grinned as she continued to wipe the wine off my shirt. "I think you're just teasing me to get back at me for ruining your shirt because I'm not Mrs. America." "Maybe not, but do you have naturally attractive manners?" "What kind of manners?" she asked, finally removing the napkin from my chest and staring intently into my eyes. "The way you fix your hair, carry your purse and lick your lips, hold your hands, make eye contact while talking and walk. All of it is sexy. I doubt anyone taught you any of that. I think it's natural." "Were you stalking me?" She laughed, her arms at her sides, though she held a wet napkin in one hand and an empty wine glass in the other. "Not at all," I grinned. "I'm just a very observant guy who likes to look at, but not touch or harass cool women, that's all." We both just stared at each other with sly smiles on our faces for a few seconds before she took her hands off her hips. "Okay, Stevie Wonder," she laughed, obviously implying that I'm supposedly blind because I'm neither black nor musically gifted. Since I can't get wine, how about I pay to have your shirt cleaned, and if it's hopeless, I'll buy you a new one. "I have a better idea. Why don't you invite me to lunch next week?" I replied. "I'm happily married and not in an open relationship," she countered, raising her left hand and showing her ring finger. "Neither am I," I replied, raising my left hand and pointing my ring finger. "So we'll have a lot in common and a lot to talk about. And why do you want me to go to lunch with you if we're both happily married?" She verbally attacked me. "Because I want all the regulars at the restaurant I go to most often for lunch to think I'm a real stud and be jealous of me," I countered. She was silent for a moment, smiling embarrassedly, and then laughed. "Okay, but only because I feel I have to be nice to the visually impaired. When and where?" "Next Tuesday at Maxine's at 12:15. I'll make a reservation in advance." "What name will that be under?" "Sorry, I never introduced myself. Rob Tipton," I said, extending my hand. "Cassandra's husband?" she asked, taking my hand. "Yes," I answered, taking her small, soft, but firm hand in mine. "And who are you?" "Gail Preston," she answered, and then giggled as I kissed her hand. "Well, if you don't mind, Gail Preston, I'm going to go to my car now, take off these uncomfortable clothes, and put on a spare shirt, so I don't attract any more disapproving looks than usual. I'll see you Tuesday, and please wear the same dress you're wearing today. It's so seductive." "Maybe, just maybe. Bye," she giggled and waved as I turned and walked out of the patio. I didn't look back until I was a good 15 feet away from her, just in time to see her, clearly seeing me off, turn around to greet the guy I'd seen her with earlier, who I was sure was her husband. I did have a spare shirt in the trunk of my car. After changing, I did my best not to look for Gail. but instead found Cassandra and kept up a conversation with her for the next 20 minutes, and then we drove off. "What's with the shirt?" Cassandra asked as we walked to my car. "I don't remember you wearing it when we got here. It looks a little worn." "Someone spilled wine on my shirt, so I had to change into a spare that was in the trunk. Hopefully the wine will clean up at the dry cleaners." "Who spilled it?" She told me her name was Gail Preston. I'd never seen her before tonight, and we weren't talking when it happened. She just tripped over a brick in that uneven patio by the pool. "I think I recognize that name," Cassandra pondered. Then she continued, "Was it red wine?" "Unfortunately, yes." "Let me see your dirty shirt," Cassandra said, so I opened the suitcase and showed her. "I think you should just wash it and then use it as a rag or for yard work," she giggled. "It can't be used for parties." I had never cheated on Cassandra since we started dating 2 years before we got married, or in the 21 years since I met Gail Preston. I actually hated cheaters. While I did appreciate women, and over the years I'd been hit on by a couple who were hard to resist, I'd never seriously considered the proposition. Aside from the obvious immorality of cheating, I had a good life and 3 kids I was trying to raise properly, 18, 16, and 15 years old at the time, so that would have been stupid. Because don't cheaters always get caught? So I never thought of having an affair with Gail. However, oddly enough, I did think about Gail, even though I had no plans to have an affair. It annoyed me that I couldn't figure out why she kept appearing and disappearing from my thoughts over the next few days. It wasn't just that she was hot. Just about the time I stopped thinking about her, it was Tuesday. I got to Maxine's at about 1:05, and I had a good view of the front door. I told the hostess what Gail looked like, and even though she didn't recognize Gail from my description, I hadn't mentioned anything about her sex appeal. She didn't mind. I was hoping to see her when she came in. Around 12:17, I didn't look at the clock too often, did I? I saw her walk in. My opinion of her attractiveness was confirmed when virtually every pair of male eyes followed her exciting gait as she approached my table, wearing the same charming dress she had worn at the event. I rose to greet her. "Hi, Gail. Thanks for coming," I blurted out, taking her hand and kissing it. "What a gentleman you are. Or rude, I'm not sure yet," she grinned as I released her fingers. We had a very pleasant 93-minute, not that I was counting, lunch. First, we went over the menu. Then we talked about the event we'd met at, what Gail and I had done for our lives, our families, and current events. The conversation was never strained, was always upbeat, and avoided any discussion of sexuality, with one exception. All of the men's gazes settled on Gail again as she left the table to go to the restroom, and I paid the bill. I met her outside of Maxine's. "So, Gail, before we part ways, could you at least acknowledge that the reaction of the male patrons at Maxine's has confirmed my opinion of you and that I'm no Stevie Wonder?" "What? What do you mean?" she asked, surprisingly a little flustered. "Didn't you notice that there were several male eyes following you as you walked to the table, then to the restroom, and then back here?" "You're making this up, Rob." "Stop it," she said, blushing, and then playfully slapped my arm. "Okay, but we'll have to argue about that someday," I grinned. We then mutually thanked each other, and she leaned in for a hug. After she thankfully declined my nonchalant offer to walk her to her car, I waved goodbye and said, "I really hope to see you at another event," to which she hummed, "Me too." And I could have sworn she was staring at my crotch. It took me the better part of a day to calm down, and during that time I vowed to keep my distance from Gail because my reaction to her was atypical and disturbing. After a week, I stopped thinking about her, at least often. About 3.5 weeks after our lunch on a Saturday night, I saw Gail again at another event, this time mostly indoors because the day was hot and required air conditioning. Although we glanced at each other quite often, we didn't approach each other until the typical boring political speech that served as the occasion for our gathering was over. "Hi, Rob. It's so good to see you again," Gail blurted out, coming over to me and hugging me from the side, for which I was very grateful, as I immediately got a full-body shiver from just our furtive glances. "Have you ever met my husband, Jackson?" she asked, turning to the guy next to her, who I suspected at the last event was her spouse. "Hi, Jackson," I said, shaking his hand. Rob Tipton, nice to meet you. Just at that moment, Cassandra walked up. Hi, Gail and Jackson, aren't you? She said hello to them, extending her hand. The four of us talked for a few minutes before the others came over and took Cassandra and then Jackson away, leaving me alone with Gail. You look great, Gail, I said, trying not to sound too assertive. You're still having trouble seeing, aren't you? She giggled. Then she surprised me. In fact, I think there are more women here who would find you sexy than men who would find me sexy. I'd love to bet you on that, but either way, I'd be extremely upset if I asked anyone here about it, I smiled. Okay, shy boy, no more talk about appearances then. We chatted some more. I felt very strange talking to her, especially when she lightly touched my arm when she was proving something. I was sure I was sweating profusely, though I was afraid to look at myself or pretend to go to the cool air vent. When it was obvious that things were going downhill, Gail, with another exhilarating light touch of her hand on mine, startled me with something else. Oh, by the way, I'll be in the same office building as you on Wednesday morning on the 6th floor. Would you mind if I stopped by your office to say hello? I'd be honored, I replied. However, though, I'd only be honored if you'd let me take you out to lunch again, this time at Burgomaster's. I've always wanted to visit the place, but I'll probably finish my business at 10:30, and I don't want to bother you if... Don't worry about it, I interrupted. I'll just show you around. Okay, it's a date, she chirped. I hadn't overlooked the likely ambiguity of the meaning of the word date. Yes, it's a date, I smiled, kissing her hand again. She giggled, and then we separated to find our spouses. After Cassandra and I left the event that Saturday night, it was both pleasant and unsettling at the same time. It was pleasant because, once we made sure our 15-year-old and 16-year-old girls were in their rooms getting ready for bed, our daughter Brittany had stayed with her girlfriend for the night, and that our 18-year-old would likely not be back until just before dawn, we showered together for the first time in years. I tormented Cassandra's body, sucking on everything I could. I tried to put thoughts of Gail out of my mind before our meeting on Wednesday, but I caught myself calling her cell phone every day just to chat. One day, while she and I were chatting online, I happened to come across an article on Yahoo that intrigued me. I quickly hung up the phone and read the article carefully. Apparently, researchers from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill and SUNY Buffalo conducted a series of studies in 2015 and 2016 involving hundreds of male and female students. While they evaluated a number of different personality traits or abilities that members of one gender found desirable in members of the other gender, they came to the surprising conclusion that women found the ability to tell stories in guys more attractive than any other personality trait or ability. Men, on the other hand, didn't seem to be confused by a woman's ability to tell an interesting story. This study made me wonder, did women really find me attractive just because I was good at spinning yarn? Because it was an ability I had possessed since childhood? Was Gail's very positive reaction to me during our first lunch and at the Saturday night event partly due to my stories? Because she seemed to be smiling and grateful to me the whole time? I then deliberately collected stories in my head, both from my personal life and from the news, that I thought she might like. I guess I couldn't fool myself that I wasn't trying to impress her. Gail showed up at my office in an elegant business suit around 10:45 Wednesday morning. I gave her a tour of my firm, introducing her to all the women and some older men. I told many stories. In return, I got lots of laughs, chuckles, sighs, and her trademark sexy touches on my arm from Gail. I had a reservation at Burgomaster's restaurant for noon. We got there a couple minutes early and sat in a comfortable, secluded spot by the window, but in the farthest part of the restaurant. We had, at least from my point of view, and Gail's too, unless she was a seasoned pretender, a truly delightful time. However, our reactions to each other, my narration, and the somewhat sexualized nature of some of my stories, and our conversation all felt more like a lunch date than two friends having a meal together. After one story that was too provocative, Gail said, "Ew," and waved her hand in front of her face. With her other hand, she held me under the table. Our lunch was followed by the first period of silence. I diffused the tension by saying, "We could have lunch again sometime next week. I really enjoy your company." Well, I'm afraid not, Rob, she murmured, glancing back and forth between me and the table, then away. Why not? You're so charming it makes me uncomfortable, she said, after a long pause, continuing to look around the room. No one has called me adorable since my mom when I was 5 years old, back before my first growth spurt, I grinned. She laughed and then stared intently into my eyes. You're a liar. You know you're adorable. Neither of us have ever been deceived, but I see the warning signs on the road ahead, so I need to turn around and not meet you one-on-one again. I'm sorry, but you know I'm right. After a long pause, inspiration came over me. In anticipation, I said, I'm used to calling you, chatting with you, and telling you a story or two. I'm not sure I can give that up. I guess I'll have to keep in touch with you. Without stalking you, of course. I smiled. Please don't, she pleaded, squeezing my hand that I used to hold hers under the table. I pretended it hit me. There is one thing that will prevent me from ever contacting you, and never meeting face to face again. What? She asked suspiciously. If you take off your panties right now, while we're sitting at this secluded table, and give them to me, I promise never to mess with you again. Are you serious? She asked. When I smiled and nodded my head yes, she had this puzzled look on her face as she said, Can't do that. Why not? I asked. You're wearing panties, aren't you? Of course I am, pervert, she snapped playfully, squeezing my hand under the table again. There's a good reason for that. Tell me what it is, I chuckled, squeezing her hand. Well, it's so embarrassing. They're wet. Did you wet them? I asked, pretending to be serious. No, asshole, she retorted, pulling her hand out of mine and crossing her arms over her chest. Her face, however, had a look of amusement on it, not anger. Hey, I'd rather have them wet than dry. You're such a fool, she giggled, looking around. Then suddenly both of her hands were under her elegant business skirt. She quickly pulled her ass off the chair and obviously took them off. She bent over as her legs slid up, obviously lowering them down to her ankles and then removing them from her feet. Shoving her right hand under the table, she muttered, Okay, they're off. Take them from my hands under the table and put them in my jacket pocket. Don't complain about their condition or I'll take them back. With a devilish grin, I did as commanded. It made me feel better than I had ever felt in my life. Now don't you ever mess with me again, understand? Gail cut me off, crossing her arms over her chest. Got it, I said, standing up since I'd already paid the bill. I pushed the table back to make it easier for her to get out. She surprised me when she took my hand and we walked out of the restaurant in silence. As we walked out, she grabbed my tie, pulled my face to hers, and gave me a quick but meaningful kiss on the lips. You're making me wish I was a whore, she murmured, before kissing me a second time. And then she untied my tie and tossed a don't call over her shoulder and walked away. I felt the wet panties in my pocket and watched Gail's jiggling ass disappear into the distance. I had mixed feelings. Our mutual attraction was dangerously palpable, and neither of us wanted to ruin our lives. On the other hand, our mutual attraction was dangerously palpable, and it made me feel more alive and horny than ever. Gail was right. The breakup was necessary. I kept her panties in my safe in the office. That was the end of it. We overcame our animal lust, acted responsibly, put each other out of our minds, and have lived happily ever after with our spouses ever since. Oh, wait, this is a story on a literary website. Maybe it isn't. On Thursday, 15 days, 2 hours, and 4 minutes later, not that I keep track of time, after Gail and I parted for good, my secretary said, Mrs. Preston is on line 2. I was stunned. Hi, Gail. It's so good to hear from you, was my unoriginal introduction. Hi, Rob. Yeah, I told you never to call me, but I didn't say I wouldn't call you, she laughed. You could drive a truck through that loophole, girl, I grinned. Well, this is a special occasion. I'm not going to molest you like you threatened to until I give you my panties. What's wrong? I forgot that Jackson gave me those panties for our anniversary last year, and he asked me to wear them last Saturday when we went out. I told him they were in the wash and I didn't want to take them out and wash them on purpose. but I promised to wear them this Saturday night. He's taking our 2 kids out for a walk all morning and afternoon on Saturday, but tonight he and I are going to go to the theater with friends." "Do you really need them to come back?" I laughed. "What do I get in return?" "You little bastard! Can't you just be on your best behavior? Can't you just be charming?" She giggled. I laughed. "I told you I haven't been charming since I was 5. How about I let you pick out another pair? As long as they're second-hand," I giggled. "God, you're a pervert. Okay, I guess I don't have much of a choice. When can you bring them over?" "How about Saturday morning? You'll have time to wash them before you get dressed for the play, and Cassandra has an event scheduled most of Saturday that I don't have to attend." Okay, Jackson and the kids will be leaving around 9 a.m. and returning around 4 p.m., so any time between 10 and 2 would be best. How to get to my house, write it down. After writing down the directions, I said, "See you Saturday at 10 a.m., and we said a quick goodbye. I took the panties out of the safe, put them in an opaque plastic bag, and hid the bag in my briefcase. I fucked Cassandra to exhaustion Thursday night and Friday morning. On Friday, she could barely walk, though of course she didn't complain. "What's gotten into you, boy?" she asked. "I was imagining sleeping with Gail Preston," was my answer. Fortunately, only in my head. Thankfully, the filter between my brain and my mouth worked perfectly. "Can't I just be in love with my wife?" I asked. "Did something come over me?" "No, I'm not complaining or questioning," she laughed, and then jumped up to take a shower. Saturday morning, I pulled up to Gail's house at 9:45. As best I could, I looked around to make sure Jackson was gone. Around 9:55, I rang her doorbell holding an opaque bag in my hand. Gail opened the door wearing shorts and a strappy top, no shoes or makeup. She looked sexy as hell, sexier than I'd ever seen her. "I apologize for my appearance. I was just cleaning up a little bit." "Damn, you look better than ever," I growled, and the filter between my brain and my mouth went out again. "Now I know you're blind," she giggled. "Come on in. Would you like something to drink?" "All I have to do is look into your eyes," I grinned. "You're as much of a talker as you are blind, aren't you?" She giggled. It felt really, really good to look at Gail. I could really get a good look at her thighs and her shorts. They were world class. I started chatting about all sorts of trivia, trying to see every curve and bulge of her body. Finally, we got to the reason for my visit. "So, Rob, did you get my panties back?" Yeah, sure," I mumbled, holding out the plastic bag. Gail walked over to me, took the bag, looked inside, and said, "Thank you. I now have 3 panties in my bedroom for you to choose from. I'll be right back." Her ass wiggled as she made her highly sexual walk to the bedroom. A couple minutes later, she returned holding 3 pairs of panties in her right hand. "So here are 3 pairs for you to choose from," she smiled. "Actually, I want the other pair," I said, not even taking the 3 from her. "What other pair?" she asked, puzzled. "You said you wanted a used one, and these are the only 3 I haven't washed." "No, there's a 4th. The one you're wearing now," I said, looking at her intently. "Okay," she muttered, turning to go back to her bedroom. "No, I want you to take them off here so I can be sure I'm getting what I want," I said with irritation in my voice. I heard her mutter under her breath, "Oh, no shit, no shit." She stood staring at me for about 30 seconds, obviously contemplating whether to do what I was asking. I upped the ante, dropping my shorts and boxers and soon my t-shirt. Gail muttered, "Oh, hell no," a couple more times. Then she dropped the 3 panties she was holding in her hand, quickly pulled down the shorts and flowered panties she was wearing, stepped over them and threw the panties in my face. I caught them in midair, tossed them on top of my discarded clothes, and walked over to her. She looked like a deer in the headlights until I began gently stroking her arms, then smoothly removed her top and bra, and we made contact with our lips. When we broke our first kiss, it was like a horse race. Eventually, I collapsed to the floor, pulling Gail down on top of me. We kissed feverishly and stroked each other's bodies. She kissed my forehead and said, "I'll be right back." When I got dressed again at 2:15 and stuffed the panties she was wearing into the pocket of my shorts, I was dizzy, but I was orders of magnitude more sexually satisfied than I had ever been in my life. This woman was a goddess and had taken the best of me, sexually. "This isn't over," I growled. "I wish it wasn't," she growled back, still naked with her thighs glistening, before she imprinted a goodbye kiss on me, and I walked out. Over the next 3 years, until Gail and her family moved 1,050 miles away, I learned a lot about life, sex, and especially guilt. While I was getting too many endorphins during sex with Gail, averaging 2 different sessions, several acts per session per week, to think during our sexual adventures, the rest of the time guilt was my constant companion. However, instead of letting it eat me up from the inside out, I put it into action. The week before Gail moved in, Cassandra summarized my turning guilt into action as Cassandra and I lay in post-coital bliss after vigorous sex. "Rob, you must be the best husband and lover in history. You respond to my every desire, put up with my shit when I'm in a bad mood, and have me better than anyone else, even better than when we first got married. Plus, the kids and all their friends, with the exception of Brittany's boyfriends who are scared to death of you, Brittany, our 18-year-old daughter, think you're the coolest daddy ever. I love you so much. You have Gail to thank for that." She turned me into a sex machine, and the guilt associated with that has made me try harder than ever to be a good husband and father. Well, I didn't actually say what was in the previous paragraph, although it's true. The filter between my brain and my mouth works better than if I had said something like that out loud. My response was actually this: "You and the kids are so great, it's easy to reciprocate." And then I fucked Cassandra again, thinking of Gail's sweet and vigorous ass and hips. Sigh.